Are you smarter than a fifth grader? It seems like Republican presidential contender Nikki Haley is pretending she is not. This week, Haley walked back comments she made during a town hall in New Hampshire on Wednesday, where she would not acknowledge that slavery was a factor when a voter asked a very simple question. What was the cause of the Civil War? Take a listen.
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do.
Thank you. And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you answer that question without mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
Well, 12 hours later, Haley did some damage control and did have something to say about slavery, saying she knows slavery was, in fact, the cause of the war. Here's her attempt at a cleanup.
Of course the Civil War was about slavery. We know that. That's unquestioned, always the case. We know the Civil War was about slavery. But it was also more than that. It was about the freedoms of every individual.
Folks, anyone with an accurate history book can deduce that the Civil War was about the economics of slavery. The war was fought because folks in the South wanted to retain the right to own people who looked like me because it benefited them economically. The blood, sweat, and tears of enslaved people who worked to produce sugar, cotton, tobacco, I mean, the list goes on. It made the people who owned them rich. But in the mid-19th century, a shift of that wealth became more clear in the northern and southern regions of the United States. The North began to thrive in manufacturing, and it industrialized faster than the South. The economics of slavery were no longer the driver of wealth for those in the North, and that's where the abolitionist movements grew. Meanwhile, the South's economy continued to depend on the labor of Black enslaved people. And the Northern economy, it began far outpacing the South. Then came the election of President Abraham Lincoln, who held hostile views toward slavery. And that made Southern leaders feel threatened. So what'd they do? Well, initially, 7 Southern states seceded to form the Confederate States of America. Then in 1861, the most costly and deadliest war ever fought on American soil began in South Carolina, when the Confederates fired the first shot with an attack on Fort Sumter. All because Southern states believed owning enslaved people was their right. Now, Nikki Haley, she knows this all too well. After all, she was the governor of South Carolina when the deadly mass shooting happened at Emmanuel AME Church in 2015. That shooting led to the Confederate flag being taken down from South Carolina's state capitol due to advocacy of many in the community and state legislators. Here's what Nikki Haley had to say on that day.
In South Carolina, we honor tradition, we honor history, we honor heritage, but there's a place for that flag, and that flag needs to be in a museum where we will continue to make sure that people can honor it appropriately. But the State House that's an area that belongs to everyone, and no one should ever drive by the State House and feel pain.
Does this sound like a person who does not know what the Civil War was about? I did not think so. It is very important that history is told accurately, because when we deny our nation's terrible truths, they are bound to repeat themselves. Now, when the Civil War ended, folks, the Confederate leaders, they were welcomed back into the fold of the American economy. They met no serious consequences for leading a treasonous effort to take up arms against the United States government. In fact, many had statues built in their honor that stand in places of prominence across our country today. That sound familiar? Well, to me, it sounds just like when the orchestrators and the architects and the puppet masters of January 6th, including former President Donald Trump, went home after their attack at the Capitol was over. They went back into American society after inciting rioters who took up arms against the United States government with the plan to assault our democracy. Many are held as patriots by those on the right. And Donald Trump, he could actually be reelected. All this is why we are still dealing with what some would call the vestiges of slavery in this country. Joining me now to unpack this, I needed somebody good, so is the distinguished professor of African American and Diaspora Studies at Vanderbilt University, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Doc, thank you for being here. First of all, did I give him a history right?
You got it absolutely right. And it's astonishing that in a nation that prides itself on knowing history, if you look at the New York Times bestseller list in the nonfiction, always there are 5 or 6 or 7 books that are obsessed with history. We love history in America, except when it comes to people of color, in this case, particularly African-American people. We are obsessed with history until we fall into what Gore Vidal, the late great author, called the United States of amnesia. Surely Nikki Haley is smart enough to understand that the premise of the Civil War rode directly upon the reins of controlling black flesh through slavery. And enslaving African people in America was the bread and butter of American society, not only in the South, by the way, but a new book, The Stolen Legacy of Wealth, written by Brother David, talks about this, that the North derived tremendous benefit, even as it articulated its abolitionist politics. The reality is that they benefited in the North and South from enslavement. So there's no way that Nikki Haley is oblivious to this fact. But what she is doing is playing to the Gala Gallery. She's playing to the MAGA gallery. And that MAGA gallery are those who don't want to mention race, don't want to mention slavery. And let's end by saying this. This is what you get when you try to ban history from America. DeSantis, you're not off the hook because you live in a state where you've denied people the access to books, banning black brains, banning black ideas that then lead to this kind of miserable and horrible anti-historicism that Nikki Haley embodied.
You know, Doc, I was just really struck by and I did not have, the Civil War on my bingo card as something that we would all be discussing this week. But I was struck by these parallels as we started to pull the layers back between the treasonous terrorists that took up arms against the United States government during the Civil War and the architects and the insurrectionists behind January 6th. And what do those parallels show us? What do they tell us?
That's a tremendous point. Look, they had the unmitigated gall to drag the rag of disloyalty, the very emblem that they had rejected the premise of democracy upon which the nation was founded and upon which it rested in tender form. They drug that disloyal rag through the most sacred territory in American civic life. They put their feet up on the desk of Nancy Pelosi, but they shook the mud of their disloyalty on the face of every true American. So there is a tremendous parallel here, pretending that they are the most loyal to the country when indeed they are the most disloyal. An election had been held. A duly sworn figure had been put into office, or at least was waiting to be put into office, and they rejected the consequences of a duly elected person, and as a result of that, tried to put in their own man. They were going against every principle, every predicate, and every premise of American democracy because of their own refusal to acknowledge the legitimacy of electoral politics. This is what happens when white supremacy takes the place of American democracy. And make no mistake, this was the embroiled faction of American disinterest and disloyalty, disinterest in democracy and disloyalty to the nation in order to hold high their flag. There's a tremendous parallel between January 6th and what went on there. And you know why? When they ask black people, what do you think about January 6th? It's always January 6th in black America, because we've seen white brothers and sisters wowed out on the thinnest of premises. Things that are good for black people, accept it. You lost. You didn't win the election. Go home and then try again. When it comes to them, no. Don't take your bitter defeat and then your lumps and try to vote again and therefore get a better candidate. No. If you will, engineer the election so that the outcome predicts your providence, your superiority, and your person winning. That is the very antithesis of American democracy.
Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, thank you. Thank you very much.